recording. So thank you everybody for joining this session. So in this session, what we're going to be covering right now is my top 5 learnings from a project where we were as a subcontractor. And kind of a quick, brief background on me. My name is Toni Karlsson, and I am a project manager. I have a very technical background. I've done back-end development, front-end development, and also, in addition to that, I've done marketing, digital fundraising, and recently I've been managing Drupal website projects. And my contact info is there. Hit me on LinkedIn or email me if you have any questions. So basically what we're going to be talking today is going over this project and going in from the subcontractor's point of view. And so a little bit of a background on the project. So basically this project was for a state agency, state of Minnesota agency, big agency, with a large website that has a lot of traffic. And the website was kind of outdated, and it had sort of like, it was at the end of its life cycle, and the site wasn't responsive, it had some accessibility issues, and it really was in the need of redesign and just ready to be rebuilt. And also the site was hosted, it was in a SharePoint site, and part of this thing was that there was a licensing thing that was expiring, which was helping the agency basically come to the point that, okay, we need a new website, and then Drupal 8 was chosen as the site and the technology that the new website will be built. And so the project structure was the following. So we basically had 3 parties involved. We had the client, we had the main contractor, and then we had our company at the time, our company who was subcontractor in the project. And basically the idea was that the roles and responsibilities between these 3 parties were the following. So the client obviously wanting to have a new website, and that was their main role. And in addition to that, they also have a large development staff. And part of this project, part of the goal was basically train their developers in Drupal 8 as we went along with the project. So they would gain the knowledge of Drupal 8, and in the end, they would be basically able to maintain the site on their own. And then the main contractor was where the project direction was coming from, and then also the technical architecture, and then the technical direction for the project and for the website, and how it was built and designed came from the main contractor. And in addition to these 2 areas, they also were doing the QA for a site. So code review and QA was also their responsibility. So then our role as a subcontractor, so we were responsible for design, most of the development, and then, like I was mentioning before, so the training, the state agency developers in Drupal 8 as we went along. All right, now we have the basics away, and now we get to the learnings part. So number one, my learning out of this project was the contract. And really what I think my main takeaway from this is that the state doesn't sign contracts, so you basically sign the state contract. So when I was brought into the project, or when I joined the project, there was already a contract in place, and the project was underway. So my role then, as a first step when I started, it was, all right, let's take a look at the contract itself. And it was really interesting because there was basically the state language, and then our company had a contract with the main subcontractor, and then also that contract was embedded as part of the main contract. So it was really like I'm listening here, I felt like it was three contracts in one contract. So basically what I did there was, as a first step, just read through the whole thing, page by page, line by line, highlighted things and risks that I could see potentially down the road coming as a, like risks, but also like potential points that some issues might be surfacing there. So, yeah, that was a fun exercise to highlight and go through the contract. All right, learning number 2, which is the project scope and the backlog. So the project was run as an agile project, and is everybody familiar with the agile methods here? Great. So it was run as an agile project where we had discovery meetings, requirements gathering, and all this was leading to writing epics and user stories, which then basically added up to our backlog, to our project backlog. And even though the project was, we were saying that it was run as an agile, but to me it was kind of a hybrid. I want to say it was a hybrid between agile and a waterfall, where there still was kind of from the waterfall world, there were clear like phases, as we have a design phase and then we have development, but with a very, very strong agile flavor to it. So I was trying to come up with a funny combined name for the agile and waterfall, but so I left it out. But you guys can figure something out.
Agile.
Thank you. So, still in the project backlog. So this is everybody most likely knows this. This is the project management triangle. So basically where you have your scope, your cost, and your time. And if one of them you're starting to affect, or if one of them changes, or it'll have an impact on the other two. So in other words, if you have everything in balance, but suddenly your time is shortened, it'll have an impact on the scope, and also it can have impact on the cost. So in this project, so bringing this into frame of the project, so what was in this project, the way it was framed was basically, so we had the contract in place, and the contract had fixed budget, and it had fixed hours. So when those two are fixed, so then basically the only variable left that we can play around with in this case is the backlog and then the scope. And this was something that I highlighted as a risk, and which was leading basically to that not everything in the backlog gets done. And so that was very much one learning out of this project. And then number 3, so the expectations. And this is kind of a very wide topic, but let's just dive right into it. So these are kind of the areas as far as the expectations go that I'm thinking. We had the project management style, we had the backlog and the scope, ticket creation, development style, and QA process. So first of all, about the project management piece. So in this we had, so each entity, a client, main contractor, and us, everybody had their own project manager. So we had a layer of project managers, which is good in my mind, and then also everybody had their own developers. So really, one of the learnings from this is that it really is a key and really important to set the expectations of how you are communicating with different project managers, and then also understanding that how those project managers are converting that communication to their teams and then vice versa, anything from their team back to the PMs, and then exchanging the information between the parties here. Backlog and scope. So this is really important. So to me, so basically when in the previous slide where we saw that we had fixed hours and a fixed budget, and then there was also on top of that basically the backlog of items sort of converted into a project scope. Converting is not the right word for that, but it's more like, all right, we have all these items in the backlog, and basically from the client's perspective, there was, all right, we're going to be developing all of this, but then from the main contractor's perspective, it was, well, not everything necessarily gets developed, so we need to be negotiating that. And so then the next thing was the ticket creation. So this was really, really key. So basically being able to convert any of our epics and user stories into an actionable tickets. And so we were writing user stories, and then every ticket also had an acceptance criteria. And there was a good conversation about what is the process, how should we go about this. And I would say we got pretty good at it towards the end of the project. It was definitely a learning experience, and I think, in my opinion, the difference between the first ticket that we wrote as a group versus the last one, I think, was the day and night. So first it was like we were still trying to figure out, and then in the end it was we had it to a point where we were able to develop well. Development style, and this is referring to when in the previous slide when I noted that the main contractor was doing the QA and the technical direction. So, and also the overall project management for the whole project was coming from the main contractor. And what happened was actually kind of funny. So I remember us having a lengthy conversation about the expectations of like how many tickets are in progress, what is in QA, how many are in one column, and we agreed on that. And then once our developers started, we were like spring chickens running out, and everybody was like, oh, I want that ticket, and suddenly we had multiple tickets assigned to multiple developers. So then basically the main contractor lost the visibility of like what is actually happening, because what we were doing from our perspective was that we were managing those tickets basically how we would be typically managing an internal project, or internal as an internal client to only us. But yeah, so it was definitely an adjustment and how to manage those tickets and how to communicate that to the main contractor. The QA process. Also in this, so there were, the expectation around the QA was that we needed to write pretty comprehensive tests on every ticket, and then basically when they went into the QA step, they were reviewed by the main contractor. So really, long way of saying that expectations around all these different areas, it's an important, and it's important internally when you're doing it in your own company, but it's also like extra important when you're doing it in an environment where you're committing to like a main contractor or another company that you don't normally work with on a day-to-day basis. And basically this leads up then that don't get hung up on the process. So in other words, for me and for us, well, for me would be, don't worry about it. If they want to have one ticket or one developer per ticket in one column in your Jira board, adjust your way of doing and just move forward. All right, number 4. Number 4 is the budget. And so basically in this project, like I said, when I joined the project was underway, there was a contract in place, and also the budget allocation for the development was coming from the main contractor. So there was basically, they had their projections how the development should be going, and we started following that. But my learnings from this is that really, like, I need to pay a really close attention to the project budget at all times. And all times in my case was like almost on a daily basis, like, and it doesn't have to be deep dive, like 2-hour analysis of where we are, even though sometimes those are needed, but it really is like, how are we doing with the hours, where are we with the budget, and just so you can have it under control. And then also the burn rate of like, how quickly are we moving through the project, the budget. And then obviously if there are any concerns or anything, like, communicate that immediately. So one example of what happened was, like I mentioned earlier, that so the projection for the development came from the main contractor, like, these are the hours, this is the velocity that we should be moving forward. And what was happening was that basically we were developing features. So the features that we were developing and were coming out, I would argue that those were on track with the pace. But what was happening was that our projected hours, so basically we didn't meet the projected hours. So on the paper it looked like we're underperforming because you don't have enough hours coming, or you don't have enough hours in your output, so you're basically underperforming. So what happened then there is that we hired an extra developer to help us out, and this was a point where we identified this as a risk that could happen. Was that basically now that we added body to our development team, so in order to be able to meet the hours that were projected, so now we were running the risk of actually flipping the scenario where we are now running hot, where we are running the hours faster than where our output is, and then that actually happened. And there are multiple factors to that, which I'm not going to go through right now. But basically that situation led into a conversation where between all the parties where we're like, all right, now we're in this situation and we're running the risk of basically using our hours earlier than expected. So in other words, not necessarily able to complete the project. Not a fun conversation to have, but it was really, really great conversation. And then in the end, what we discovered that the client was able to accommodate the situation, and the outcome was that everybody was happy, and we were actually able to complete the project on time. All right, learning number 5, which is meetings. So part of this meeting, like I was saying earlier, so we were running this in an agile-ish. What was the word that you were using?
Wagile?
Wagile. So we were we were using the Wagile method. We should probably trademark that. And
I'm sure I'm not the first.
But it sounds funny. So we had so basically on a typical week, so let's say before we started the actual development itself. So we were running in the discovery phase, and we had discovery meetings on site with the client and the main contractor, where we were pulling those. We were writing the user stories, and we were writing epics and user stories, and then also just any technical requirements gathering was happening in those meetings. And once the development started, then there was a combination of we were having a daily scrum, and then also in addition to the daily scrum, we had basically two types of ticketing meetings or sessions / meetings. One was where we were talking about the user story itself and the acceptance criteria, and then another round of those was where we were basically estimating the tickets and then getting them ready for development. The Scrum meetings were interesting, like really interesting, and not just Minnesota interesting, but like because it was kind of challenging. So if you think about the Agile, and it's like, your Scrum should be 10 to 15 minutes or whatnot, and well, short. And but due to the fact that we had so many developers on in this project, the Scrum really was growing and growing, and I think there were days when we were running like maybe 45 minutes to even an hour, which is sort of like not a Scrum anymore. So, but yeah, so it was really, like I said, it was really interesting. And then, but it was just kind of the flavor of the project. That's just how it went, and we just had to adapt and go with it. One thing, how I would summarize my learning out of this is that I think okay, let me give you an example. So basically, first, the expectation was that the whole development team from the subcontractor's perspective, would be attending most of the meetings and then most of the Scrum meetings. And then as we went along, what I realized was that it wasn't the best use of our time. And this, again, ties into the budget, where you have to pay really close attention to the budget, how many hours you're spending, and so on and so on. So really, as the project went forward, you went from everybody's in the meeting to what is the essential personnel who needs to be in that meeting, towards the end, where we were really protecting the remaining hours that were available to, all right, do we need to attend this meeting? And yeah, it was a great learning opportunity. But yeah, first everybody in the meeting, and then in the end, just one person. But that to me is like, it really, earlier I'm gonna say we should have realized the fact that just like maybe we only have one or two people from our team to attend these meetings, and try to and more like maybe even a developer, a technical type of person, and see if like that would have been a better way of converting, or actually I should say bringing whatever knowledge from that meeting back to the team. But hey, there's always the next project, so I get to try out in that in my next project. All right. So apparently I'm speeding through these slides really quickly, but that's okay, because the next thing is the party, so which I'm assuming everybody's going, right? So as a summary, I was thinking about this, so I was like, would I, or based on my experience on this project, would I work again as a consultant? And my answer is absolutely, because it was as challenging, and it was at some time, at some point, it's still there. It was so rewarding, because in the end we were able to work through whatever issues we had, whatever challenges we had, and we were able to meet the deadline when we were launching the beta site, which was really, it was like, whew, all right, we made it. So absolutely, I would work again for sure as a subcontractor. Good. All right. So there is my contact information. And if you guys have any questions, I am happy to answer them. Or I can kill or stop the recording. All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.